All right, guys, what's going on? Today we're back, and today we're talking about mini cuts. We're going to be talking all about mini cuts or mini diets or cleanup phases, sometimes they're called. We're going to be talking about what is a mini diet, who needs a mini diet, when to mini diet, why we mini diet, how to mini diet. All of those things all wrapped into one. So we're going to get pretty extensive in detail today as we talk about mini cuts and how we can use those to further our physique-related goals. So first things first, what is a mini cut? So a mini cut is exactly what it sounds like. It is a small cutting phase. It's a short fat loss phase that we use where the focus is getting body fat levels back into a respectable range so that we can continue to push forward in our gaining phase, or our bulk, sometimes it's called. The main purpose of a mini cut is to extend our gaining phase. So it's exactly as it sounds. A mini cut is a period of time that usually gets thrown in the middle of a bulking phase. So for example, say we start a bulk, we bulk for about 6 to 7 months, then we throw in a mini cut for 4 to 8 weeks, and then we jump right back into the bulking phase. And the purpose of that mini cut is to kind of clean up some of the unnecessary and negative things that happen in a bulking phase, specifically gaining body fat and fixing insulin sensitivity, and then getting right back into the bulking phase so that we can continue to put on new lean muscle. So who needs a mini cut? The people that need mini cuts are generally the athletes who are in their push-up phase, or they're in their improvement season, off season, and they continue to add tissue, but because they've either pushed the bulk too hard, or they've been in the bulk for just a very long period of time, they've set themselves up to be in a bad position in terms of body fat gain. But at the same time, even though they're in a position where their body fat is very high, they're not in a position where they want to just start a full-blown cut and get lean and shredded. They want to continue to stay in the bulking phase. But by staying in the bulking phase, when your body fat is already out of control, you're just going to further alleviate that problem. So to fix the problem, we kind of do a short mini diet where we take a step back, we clean up some of that unnecessary body fat, water storage, all of those kinds of things, and then we get right back into the mini diet so that we can keep bulking and keep putting on muscle tissue. Now, when do we mini cut? This is pretty straightforward, but it is the one aspect of the mini cut that gets misused. So we should be mini cutting when we get to the point where our body fat levels are out of our desired ranges. We're at a point where we don't really want to get much fatter than this point. And so we take a step back, and taking the step back is the mini diet, where we kind of clean things up and then we continue to push forward. This is also the biggest reason why these get overused. Mini cuts, a lot of people, as soon as they hit like 14 or 15% body fat, they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm too fat, I don't want to get any fatter than this, and they pull back. To give a general guideline, I think, and this is kind of a different topic for a different day, but I think that we need to start bringing back the quote-unquote more aggressive gaining phases. And I would say for men that we can push somewhere upwards to 20% body fat, maybe even a little higher, depending on the body composition at that body fat level. I've kind of talked about previously, both on Instagram and in a previous video, where this yo-yo dieting effect, where we're continuously trying to stay really lean, is really only doing us negative favors, right? We're not really getting anything out of that. To put on the muscle tissue that we really want, we're going to have to get uncomfortable, and we're going to have to get a little sloppy. Now, I'm not saying become obese and become a fat pig, but we're going to have to get a little sloppy and be able to put ourselves in a position where we don't want to be for our body fat, so that we can reap the benefits of being in that higher body fat level stage, and we can put on the muscle tissue that we're so desperately looking after, especially for us competitors. So again, this is probably the one thing that gets abused the most with mini cuts, is people, they hit 14 or 15% body fat for males I'm talking about here, and automatically they think they need a mini cut. To give a good general guideline, I think to earn a mini cut, and I say that earn, you need to have been in a consistent caloric surplus or in a bulking phase for a minimum of 5 to 6 months. actually closer to the higher end. I would say even 6 to 8 months. We have to be 100% realistic, especially as natural drug-free bodybuilders. Enhanced guys are a different topic. Topic for a different day. But for the drug-free bodybuilders, we have to be realistic, and unless we're beginners, within the first 6 to 8 months of a bulking phase, we're not really going to put on any considerable amount of muscle tissue. Maybe a pound, maybe a pound and a half. Again, that's going to depend on a lot of things, specifically training age, how advanced we are within training. But if you're bulking for 3 months and then mini cutting, bulking for 3 months and then mini cutting, that's what we call yo-yo dieting, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We want to really maximize the amount of time that we're in a caloric surplus and really minimize the amount of time that we're in a caloric deficit. So why do we mini cut? Again, it brings our body fat levels back down, kind of gets us into a point in which we are more healthy, better suited for performance, because just how staying lean has its negative benefits, or excuse me, negative health effects, being too fat for a long period of time and carrying too much unnecessary body fat is also unnecessary and has some unhealthy adverse effects for bodybuilding. So that's one reason why we mini cut, is to kind of bring the body fat levels back into a respectable range so that we can continue to push forward. It also can reset our insulin sensitivity, how our body reacts to carbohydrates. Our insulin sensitivity tends to get compromised when we're at higher body fat levels. From what I've seen, anything above like 17% for males. We kind of start to see where carbohydrates almost tend to get stored as fat more than they do with being used for glycogen storage and training. There's going to be a lot of people that debate me on that, but you kind of tend to see with people that are already very fat, just continuing to shovel them carbs doesn't really help the problem. And I think at some point, once your body fat levels are so high, there's kind of like a ceiling in which the carbohydrates, say the ceiling is 500 grams. Once we hit up to 500 grams, everything that's above that is kind of unnecessary, because say we can only utilize 500 grams at a time. Again, that's just a completely arbitrary number. Doesn't really mean anything in terms of hard data. It's just a completely arbitrary number that's going to be different for everybody depending on a bunch of different factors. Another very beneficial thing for mini cutting is it kind of resets our hunger levels and our appetite. Anyone that knows that's been in a very long push-up phase or a gaining phase, your appetite tends to decrease after a while. To give you an example, I've been in this phase of my bulk for 6 or 7 months, and during that 6 or 7 month time, I've never eaten below like 3,800 calories. Right now I'm at a point in my off season where I'm eating about 4,400 calories a day, and that's every single day. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I haven't been hungry, like actually felt the sensation of hunger, in probably 5 months. And eventually there's going to come a point where we're just force feeding food down our mouth because we can't, we're so full, but we need to continue to eat to continue to gain weight. And that may be a problem to some. Again, if you're very serious about this and willing to push the envelope, that's not a problem. You're willing to do whatever it takes. But for some, that's a problem. So by using the mini cutting phase, we can use that as an opportunity to kind of drop the food, give our GI system and digestion a break, and we can kind of reset our hunger so that once we get right back into the gaining phase, we can it'll be easier for us to consume the amount of food that we need, because we've kind of reset our leptin and ghrelin levels in a way. So how do we go about implementing a mini cut? So it's important to understand that mini cuts are supposed to be quick. We need to have the mentality that we're going to get in and get out in terms of fat loss. We're going to get into the deficit. We're going to get as much out of it as we can in the shortest amount of time possible, and then get right back out of it and get right back into a surplus before any of the negative effects of a harsh diet kind of start to set in. So we're going to slash calories very aggressively. So this is going to kind of be the opposite of a contest prep or a long-term sustained diet. In the instance of a contest prep or a long-term sustainable diet, we're slowly cutting calories. And we're trying to lose like 1/2 to 1.5 to 2 pounds of fat a week. This is going to be the complete opposite of that. We are going to, in essence, we're going to cut calories basically as low as we can handle them for anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. In my opinion, if your mini cut is lasting longer than 8 weeks, it's no longer a mini cut. This is starting to turn into a longer term diet phase. So how I personally like to go about implementing mini cuts is I like to reduce our dietary fat intake to what I believe is the bare minimum that we can kind of sustain a healthy lifestyle on. That's going to be roughly 0.4 kilograms per pound of body weight. So just do the math there and you'll find out pretty much where to set your dietary fats at. We're going to keep our protein where it is. We could maybe even possibly increase it from where it was in our deficit, especially with being in a very aggressive deficit phase like this. Our risk of catabolism increases. So to offset that, it may be wise to increase our protein slightly, maybe 1 ounce per meal. That's going to, again, determine what your coach tells you, how your diet has been set up previously before starting the mini cut. That's going to depend on a lot of things, so I don't really want to give any blanket terms. But again, we're going to reduce fats to about the bare minimum. We're going to keep the protein where it is, maybe slightly increase it, and then we're going to pull from carbs pretty hard too. What we're going to do in that phase is we're going to keep our carbohydrates centered around training, because it's very important to understand that even though we're in a mini diet, we need to continue to train as if we were in a surplus. So we need to keep training to get stronger and making progressions from session to session. That's how we're going to keep the muscle that we built during the off season and during the push-up phase. So again, it's important to realize with a very aggressive diet, our chance of losing muscle increases. So we need to take every step possible to make sure that we don't lose that muscle that we work so hard for. So by centering our carbohydrates around training, pre, intra, and post, we can kind of have our ensure that our training performance is going to be the highest that it can possibly be within this restricted caloric diet. So yeah, that's pretty much how we're going to go about implementing a mini cut. Again, we're looking at about 4 to 8 weeks of very aggressive dieting. We're going to try and get as much body fat and water off of us as fast as we can, and then get right back into the push-up phase. Because again, it's important to realize once we start going beyond 8 weeks of our diet, we start to get some negative side effects from being in a prolonged caloric deficit. Hopefully this answers some of your guys' questions about mini diets. Hopefully you guys learned something. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or shoot me a DM on Instagram. If you're potentially interested in online coaching, my email link is in the description below. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Take it easy.